Hello and welcome to Balance the Mob. My name's Frank and I like to do this little thing where I look at games or issues in the gaming industry and attempt a balanced approach. This week I got my work cut out for me because I'm looking at what is a Game of the Year candidate to me. Kratos is back, and even though he seems somewhat tempered and very bearded, he's as much as a badass as he's ever been. Before I get into the story, I feel like I need to gush over the game being a complete visual marvel. God of War 4 probably has the best visuals I've seen on a PlayStation 4 game to date, as it probably should be, but still. Not only are the character visuals amazing, the effects are solid and the environments are just stellar. To me, there was nothing not to love about the graphics in the game. Oh, and how cool is it that there are no load screens in the game? Everything's completely seamless from cutscene to game. It's super impressive. The game doesn't even cut away for end credits. There are some areas where you can kind of tell it's loading, but they do a great job of hiding it all. Actually, did I say there are no load screens? I guess technically you could say that you run into load screens. Pretty much only if this happens. The story picks up in Midgard where Kratos and his boy are cutting down wood to create a funeral pyre for Kratos' late wife. Kind of an odd setting for a Greek god, but putting Kratos in a Norse mythology setting is pretty interesting. And I think they handled telling the story really well. I'm going to keep the story relatively spoiler-free best I can, but it's pretty cool how they take two ancient mythologies and blend them together in a way that makes sense. Kratos and boy set out on a journey to carry the wife/mother's final wishes to scatter her ashes from the highest peak in all the realms. Along the way, they make some friends. Well, quote friends. I guess they're more like characters that decide they want to help Kratos, and he begrudgingly accepts their help as long as it suits his end goal. Typical Kratos. They also encounter new enemies. Many new enemies. Like, typical Kratos amount of enemies. To dispense with his enemies, Kratos uses this mythical frost axe, inherited from his wife, and boy, uses his hunting bow. Kratos can also use his fists to punch the daylights out of mobs, which makes for really fun and interesting combat moves you could pull. For example, you could throw your axe at one enemy, and it actually can freeze some of the weaker ones. While the enemy's frozen, you can pummel all the other enemies with your fists for a bit, recall the axe, and finish everything off by hacking them to bits. You can also order boy to fire his bow at enemies to help distract enemies or build stun meters so you can perform a sick grapple finisher. Being that this is a God of War game, you also get to fight giants and such. It just wouldn't be God of War without that. One feature about these fights I could not be happy enough about is that there are no QTE sequences to finish out the fights. Actually, there are no QTE sequences in general. I was so happy to go through the whole game without those pesky sequences. I guess the closest thing they have to a QTE, and I don't really count this as one, which is why I say it's closest, is grabbing an enemy as part of a sequence and repeatedly punching them with the regular attack buttons. So we have fun button mashing combat, fights with giants. It all feels almost exactly what any God of War fan is looking for. Only it feels like there's one thing missing. Yeah. Now, I did say I wanted to keep this relatively spoiler-free, but you had to see this coming. There's no God of War without the Chaos Blades. One more thing I wanted to cover about the combat as you plug along the story is that the epic battles with the Norse gods don't feel annoying or frustrating in the least. They're actually some of the easiest encounters in the game. They still play their part in the game extremely well by making it more about the fights feeling epic than being annoyingly and nonsensically difficult. I personally think this was the right call. The world isn't only littered with enemies. There are quite a lot of puzzles laying about with different kinds of puzzles that make use of the different weapons. Some of the puzzles are a bit annoying, but the rewards make them worth doing. You can get anything from equipment, material to upgrade equipment with the dwarves, weapon abilities, and even health and rage bar upgrades. The systems mostly feel non-invasive to your gameplay. There is a concept of levels which is mostly controlled through the gear you have equipped. This does kind of get in your way with some of the side content, but there's actually a smart aspect to that, which I'll get to later on. XP is used to upgrade your combat skills with your weapons, fists, and bow. I always run into issues with these kind of systems early on, agonizing over which skill could be the most useful to me. However, there's more than enough XP to unlock all the skills and upgrade the weapon abilities that are slotted. Everything about this game feels absolutely awesome. It's so much fun from start to finish, and one of the best single-player experiences you can get your hands on. I know I want to take a balanced approach to games, but I was just in awe of this game the whole time. That being said, if I had a gun to my head and I was told I have to find some flaws with the game, I could accommodate. This one's kind of nitpicky, but it's a bit annoying with the amount of times the word boy is uttered out of Kratos. It just gets really old after a while. And there's also one enemy I could have absolutely done without encountering more than once. Fighting this dark elf, there was a few moments where controllers were about to fly because of his blinding BS. And then there's the whole leveling thing I mentioned earlier. It's a bit of a bummer. Even though I seem to have forgiven the fact that some of the side content is somewhat level gated, it still doesn't feel great. It's somewhat of an unwritten contract between content design and player that maybe you should come back when you're stronger, but it's still not the greatest feeling in the world. My own preference would have been to let the content scale with the player so that the player can choose what to do in the world when they want. Sure, you could probably take on some of these mobs at a severe level disadvantage, but it's just asking for a ticket to one-shot city population U. I'll pass on that. There is one good thing that comes out of waiting until you're the appropriate level to do the side content. The thing is, as you meander through the main story, you are fed enough gear and upgrades to keep pace with the story content just fine. Not being able to do all the side content right away actually creates a net positive. Once you make it to the end of the story, it essentially reminds you that, hey, there's all this other content and side story about the Valkyries that you, most likely, have not gotten to. You should give it a run. It's actually pretty neat to, quote, finish the game, but have a little bit more drive to finish off the side content beyond just going for the 100%. I like to close these videos with a basic question. Is the game worth the $60 box price? If you own a PlayStation 4, absolutely. If you haven't picked this game up, what are you even doing? Get out there. Buy this right now. This is not a game you're going to want to sleep on. It's such a fun ride. Now that I've gushed about the game, there's another question that I think would be worth covering. If you don't own a PlayStation 4, is it worth picking up just for this game? That's a much tougher sell. It's a really great game, but I don't think I could in good conscience tell anyone to pick up a console for a single game. That being said, the PlayStation 4 has some excellent exclusives such as Uncharted, Infamous, Ratchet & Clank, and even upcoming titles like Spider-Man, Kingdom Hearts 3, Last of Us Part 2, and more. I would say it's worth it for all those. Alas, this isn't really a PlayStation 4 sum up or review, it's a review of God of War 4, and you have your verdict. Like I said, this is a Game of the Year candidate. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this look at God of War 4, and I'll catch you next time. Behave out there.